subregions starting out in West Africa. So there's a north-south division at play that the book talks about, and what that is sort of the same division that we see between North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa. So in this so the same narrative that's going on in between North Africa, Southwest Asia, and Sub-Saharan Africa is actually at play in a more localized way, in a smaller scale in West Africa. There's a division here. The more you move north, drier, more Islam present, cattle herding, pastoral nomadic lifestyle. Again, these generalization, but it's certainly a theme. Obviously not the it's more the rule, but there are exceptions. So again, you move. There's some sort of arbitrary line, and the more you move north, the drier, different climatic features, different ways of lifestyle, and a different religion. And the further you move south, a little bit wetter, which changes the vegetation, more Christian influence, and therefore different reliance on different agriculture. So rather than maybe cattle raising, we're actually talking about production of plants. Things like the chocolate industries actually are quite large in West Africa. And coincidentally, during the 2014 Ebola outbreak, the chocolate industry actually had a bit of a crisis because of the turmoil that was happening with loss of human life and on the chocolate industry. So anyways, international logging, agriculture, and oil. So oil is also a major part, particularly in Nigeria and off the coast into the Gulf of Guinea. There we see Equatorial Guinea, this little place, not in this region, don't get confused, not in this region, but nonetheless where that equator runs through. So we have, again, this particular area, oil. There's a whole lots of stories that we could tell on Nigeria and oil production, different things that are at play there. But for the sake of time and for the sake of trying to narrow this down for all of you to only have to focus on so much, we will not talk about Liberia here. Let's talk about that. 1990s, lots of civil wars happening in this region in the 1990s. I want to talk about one guy in particular, Charles Taylor. Terrible leader of Liberia, and he's eventually to be tried for crimes in The Hague, in the Netherlands, which we've talked about before. Omar al-Bashir in Sudan the last time, which was in North Africa, and Charles Taylor here removed after the UN has to go in and he's turned over. Liberia is interesting, though, because the United States set it up as a place for, in conjunction with the transatlantic slave trade, and a place for freed slaves. And so they eventually get independence. They elect a woman leader. I mean, this place had a lot of promise and a lot of development. And then Charles Taylor takes over and actually sets itself quite back into this decade, the 1990s. So it's recovering from a lot of civil war, a lot of strife. So there's some chocolate production going on. We talked about chocolate. Civil war, talked about civil war in the area, particularly Liberia and how it set them back in Cote d'Ivoire and Liberia and some of these other places that had civil wars have had to sort of hit the reset button and sort of get things straightened back out before they could sort of advance again. Ebola, we know Ebola is a disease, at least you might know. Ebola is a disease, again, came from the Congo a lot of years back, maybe about 40 years ago at this point, sort of the more documented cases. There's a couple different kinds of Ebola, but interaction with bats and the dead and primates, and again, depending on the strain, but Ebola, burying the dead that had Ebola was the largest way other people were getting Ebola. There's a very traditional way of burying the dead in this region, and not following suit was considered not appropriate. So really this is the way it should be dealt with, but that was very difficult for some people to come to terms with, and they were actually continuing to transmit the disease. Coming in contact with bodily fluids of any sort would high risk of transmitting the disease. Lagos, Nigeria, that's that city that is booming from 12 million to 25 million, coming up by 2050. You can see this pretty happening place with the skyscrapers and growth. Central Africa, Congo River Basin, we talked about that a lot. Congo River Basin here offers a ton of biodiversity. It's a sanctuary for biodiversity. We already talked about this a lot by picking on King Leopold II in the Belgian Congo. This was the Belgian Congo, the Congo Free State, and the feature of the movie Lumumba from the year 2000. And so when we're talking about the Congo, Congo-Kinshasa, the Belgian Congo, also called Zaire, because of this guy, remember? Mobutu Sese Seko, or Joseph Desiré Mobutu. And Mobutu, I actually pause. I have a prop. I once had a class, African government and politics class, and we talked about Joseph Mobutu, and we watched, and Patrice Lumumba and everything, and we watched Lumumba. And so you could thank him for why you had to watch it, because I thought it was a great movie. And as you saw, Mobutu has a very iconic hat, and we can't get the same hat because it's doesn't exist, of course. But he told the class, he's like, if I could ever get that hat or a similar hat, I'd wear it. And so I was inspired by that, and I actually got this hat for him, but I couldn't get it to him. So I thought, well, before I do that, I'm gonna take it upon myself and go ahead and use it myself. So here we go. Is it poofing up? Don't want to look like an idiot. So something like that. And so for Central Africa, we remember Mobutu Sese Seko redestroys the Congo because he attempts to Africanize the Congo. We remember we had the Belgian Congo, it becomes the Congo, and then this guy takes over well, let me just go to him for a second. Gabon and Equatorial Guinea are OPEC members, Gabon and Equatorial Guinea. Now here we go. We get to look at it. Who wore it better type of thing. I don't have the glasses with me, but shame. But again, hat's slightly different, but definitely inspiring in terms of the headwear. Terrible leader, actually terrible person, not to sound over the top aggressive, but Joseph Mobutu, we know that movie, the Congo Crisis from 1960 to 1965, is occurring during the time of our movie, Lumumba. And from 1965 until 1997, this guy leads the Congo, and he wants to Africanize the Congo. So he changes his name from Joseph Desiré Mobutu to Mobutu Sese Seko. He changes the name of the Congo to Zaire, the Congo River to Zaire River. And again, a lot of dedication here. But it's not just the name changes. That's certainly what didn't make him a good leader. He just ruled in a terrible dictatorship that was harmful to the Congolese people. Here, a diamond district in Belgium, because again, it still continues to show that overwhelming majority of diamonds that are produced in the world go through Antwerp, Belgium, and the diamond district, still because of that colony that exists there. Remember the chocolate and the diamonds that the Congo produces. More so the diamonds, we know runs through Belgium, what they're sort of known for, and that sort of colonial legacy still exists. We know Joseph Mobutu, we know about him and Monongo from the Katanga province, if we remember, where the resources were from predominantly in the Congo. In Congo-Kinshasa, there was a province, a specific territory, like we would have a state. There was Katanga. We know they succeeded, they separated themselves out. Moi Shambe and Monongo have themselves a little government happen in there, which is we know why Lumumba had trouble visiting there with President Kasavubu, Joseph Kasavubu. Kasavubu tries to visit with Patrice Lumumba as president and prime minister, respectively. And then we know in charge of defense and the military, Joseph Mobutu, he eventually takes control of the country, and he does not let go until 1997. Which is a long time to rule the country. Western gorillas, so you have two larger species of gorillas, and Western gorillas to West Africa area, again, protected, critically endangered animal in this area where this sanctuary for diverse habitat. Well, that takes care of my Mobutu hat for now. And hopefully we determined who were better. But again, we want to remember those actors in the Congo. Moi Shambe is one that takes over the Katanga province and has his way in terms of the succession. Joseph Mobutu, who's the military and actually has a military coup and takes over the country. And then we have Patrice Lumumba, who tries to unite the country in a Pan-Africanist way, more broadly, and he's the prime minister of the Congo. And then we have Joseph Kasavubu, who's the president with Patrice Lumumba. So a lot of people to get right there is kind of important, because we talked about it a little bit more, and the book actually talks an awful lot about the Belgian Congo. Isn't that something? Why are we watching these movies? Well, here we go. We watched the movie Lumumba. We've read an awful lot about the Belgian Congo, Congo-Kinshasa, and Joseph Mobutu and others. And so we're putting it all together. And actually, there's a reason why we're doing all that we do. Hope that helps. East Africa, the Horn, remember, the Horn of Africa. It's a little bit of a drier area. Ethiopia, not colonized, and sort of a home of human expansion, if you will, the birthplace of modern humans. Madagascar Island, Tanzania, and Kenya. The world's newest country, South Sudan, from 2011. It's a relatively dry region in the north with savanna to the south, which we know the Serengeti and some other places that we're going to get to talk about, like right now, and Mount Kilimanjaro, that's in the song, the song Africa by Toto. Listen to it. You might like it, but they talk about the rains down in Africa, in something rising above, like maybe a leprous rising above the Serengeti and Mount Kilimanjaro. I don't know the song by heart, but nevertheless, song inspired by this region. And so terrorism, and moving on, we have to move on from that. I can't get too bogged down into the rock and roll oldies. Terrorism and piracy remain an issue in the region. So we know Al-Shabaab out of Somalia, and we know Boko Haram, which is more so of a Nigerian problem, but we know Al-Shabaab there. We know that the movie Black Hawk Down comes from this area. We know the movie, I don't know, is it called Captain Phillips? I don't know what the movie's called, actually, to be honest. Forgot. Maybe I actually never knew. I never saw the movie. All I know is that meme you saw, look at me, I'm the captain now, that meme that you've probably shared a million times, or at least you've seen a million times at one point, maybe a couple years ago. This isn't really that current. The Alabama, our ship that's off this coast, again, piracy, that takes place here. So it's inspired some two movies, Black Hawk Down and I think Captain Phillips, I don't know. Again, so there we are there. So again, terrorism and piracy is a form of economics in terms of the piracy, a level of economic activity for those people. And terrorism that's somewhat grounded in Islam, well, they try to use the guise of Islam to justify their terrorism, which is certainly not true. But that's the case that Al-Shabaab sometimes makes it. They link up with some other terrorist activity. Madagascar, the island. Lemurs, ring-tailed lemurs. Madagascar, the movie. Okay, pictures. Mount Kilimanjaro, there's always a presence of snow here because of its high peak. However, less and less of it now thanks to climate change. The Serengeti, and you think of an African safari, you'd be thinking about this area maybe. Dar es Salaam, over 4 million people, one of the fastest growing cities in the world, growing up here on the coast of Tanzania. Idi Amin, a former dictator of this country here, Uganda, not so good for civil rights and civil liberties even today in terms of some of their treatment. Oh, we talked about Rwanda and Burundi. These are these two countries there. We talked about Rwanda because of the Hutus and the Tutsis. But there's Uganda above it. Some of this area down in here, we have Lake Malawi and Lake Tanganyika, which are sort of famous lakes, but bodies of water. But again, we'll talk about Dar es Salaam being one of the fastest growing cities of the world. We have the Serengeti in this region coupled with Mount Kilimanjaro. And Idi Amin, former dictator 1970s of Uganda. This guy, get a load of this. I have his title written down because I would no way have it memorized. And based on him, I don't even know if he would remember his title that he prescribed to himself if he didn't have it written down. This is his official title that he gave himself as leader of Uganda, more known as dictator of Uganda. I think it was like 1971, 1979. Lord of all the beasts of the earth and fishes of the seas, and conqueror of the British Empire in Africa in general and Uganda in particular. I kid you not. That was his official title. Lord of all the beasts of the earth and the fishes of the sea, and conqueror of the British Empire in Africa in general and Uganda in particular. It's probably one of those things that maybe, I don't know, we all can appreciate as being sort of funny. It wasn't so funny because he was a forceful dictator, but that title, I mean, come on. Remember that this guy is like the title that never ends. Conqueror of the British Empire in general, and Uganda in particular. Assigns it his very particular title. Moving on, Southern Africa, region of Sub-Saharan Africa, is struggling with HIV/AIDS the most of all these regions. 20% of all adults in this region HIV positive. So we're talking about millions and millions of cases here living with it. The use of antiretrovirals are becoming increasingly available, so it's becoming not the same critical threat to life as it has, but nevertheless still a major health issue for this region to reconcile, and as a health issue around the entire world. I mean, this issue is not definitely just part of Sub-Saharan Africa, but Africa in general, and it's a health problem throughout the entire world, including the United States. But rapid urbanization and other population growth and some other factors at play here in Sub-Saharan Africa in particular, and resources make it this being a very hard-hit region by it. So this is the most prosperous region in Sub-Saharan Africa. Our entire chapter 7 so far, so from the Sahel down, this is the most prosperous region. Mainly because South Africa, being a very strong country in terms of its economics, is the one with the strongest manufacturing base, quote-unquote the most developed in a lot of ways, not the most across the board, as we'd see. There's a lot of development happening in Lagos and Dar es Salaam and others, but across the board we would say that this place has a lot of things going for it in the region in particular. We talk about apartheid as an official sort of policy of segregation that happened in South Africa between whites and blacks until Nelson Mandela comes and breaks through. Nelson Mandela here, he was president of South Africa from 1994 to 1999. Prior to, he spent 27 years in prison for his work of ending apartheid and creating a better South Africa. He passed away just a few years ago in his 90s. We remember him in that way for his heroic effort in South Africa. Luanda, Angola, a very developing city. It's one of the most expensive cities in the world because of its rapid growth. And these both pictures come from Cape Town, South Africa. So we know Cape Town, day zero is coming, but they're pushing it back through water conservation efforts. We know it's a very developed area. It's the largest city in South Africa, 4+ million people, but it's also an area home to many slums. And that being said, that just sort of captures the theme throughout all of Africa's rapid growth and rapid urbanization and growth around the entire world, is you do see then slums sort of tack on to the suburbs as you move out from the city center, that these sort of slums just roll out due to, again, rapid urbanization and the lack of adequate housing that can keep up with the development.